All right, I'm back. I'm back, Bronco Nation. No, to everybody who has been asking, I did not die. I was not kidnapped. I was just simply on a camping trip, so I was unable to get the review video out immediately following the game. But here we are, Sunday night, the review of the Boise State versus Air Force game. So welcome, Bronco Nation, back to my game review for Boise State versus Air Force. Thank you for coming back to the channel. Hope everybody has enjoyed their time here reflecting on the results of Saturday's win. And a big win. This was a team that Air Force obviously not looking like a very good team so far. We knew that coming in for what we saw versus Utah State. However, this was a very significant win for Boise State, not necessarily because of the quality of the opponent, but because of who the opponent was. Air Force is a team, as the score of this game showed. Air Force is a team that it does not matter how good either program is, they have always seemed to have Boise State's number. And beyond that, this was Boise State's first win in their Mountain West calendar for their goal, their number one goal of getting back to and winning the Mountain West Conference Championship. So while other goals may seem to be out of reach, Boise State right now controls their own destiny to the Mountain West title. It all started with a big win versus Air Force at Air Force, the last time that Boise State has to go down and face the Academy again, a team that Boise State has had a very close series, almost a rivalry, a lot of respect between the fan bases, but overall on the field very much close to a rivalry game, and Boise State winning this game 49-37. A big win for Boise State as they continue to resurrect a season that did not start the way they wanted to, but Boise State is getting stronger as the weeks move forward. So we're going to look at this game. We're going to look at the offense. We'll look at the defense. We'll look at the special teams. We'll look at how Boise State performed in each of those areas, and then we'll grade how Boise State performed against my keys to the game. I want to shout out the score prediction challenge winner from last week. It's actually Mike Earhart, 1270, a longtime listener of the channel, actually someone that I have a lot of conversations for the games. I enjoy his messages before the matchups, talking about his own thoughts, and great job, Mike. Very close. Not a lot of people were as close as this, and obviously that's why Mike won. But what I mean by that is most of the score predictions were all over the place. Some, like myself, were expecting a low-scoring, close affair. Some thought Boise State gets back on track. They establish themselves dominant offensive performance, which that part was true, and they blow Air Force out of the water. That bit not quite coming true. However, Mike, really close, 42-32. So only 7 points off of the Boise State final score of 49, and only 5 points off of the Air Force score of 37. So again, we're going to go through offense, defense, and special teams, and also look how Boise State performed against my keys to the game and grade each of those areas. Before we get into any of that, though, I want you all to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Obviously, this was a matchup that I think we're very nervous about. Even those predicting a big score win can't have been looking at this one with a lot of ease or peace of mind. Well, now, Bronco fans, the shackles of the triple option are gone. We are free. We never have to face it again. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on how Boise State performed in this game. You can add them as you go throughout the video, but let me know your thoughts on this matchup, how you think Boise State performed, and what this tells for the season moving forward. And while everyone's getting their game thoughts down in the comments below, I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you real quick about the sponsor for this video. The sponsor for this video is going to be Expedia Cruises of Boise. They're having their grand opening next week. They're opening up their store in Boise, their grand opening at 13601 West McMillan Road. They're going to be having a tailgate starting at 11 a.m., tailgates, prizes, giveaways, and then at noon, they're going to have an autograph of 3 incredible Boise State Broncos, TJ Akery, Ricky Chongatu, and Tyreek Jones. 3 great Broncos from the past. And at 1 p.m. a travel talk with Pete Hayes. Of course, the Boise State kickoff game versus App State isn't until about 4 hours after all of that. So you have plenty of time to catch this on your way to tailgate for Boise State versus App State. So please make sure that you check this out and support the sponsor of today's video. All right, welcome back. I hope that everybody has their comments down below, their thoughts on the game. You can add to them as we move throughout the rest of the video. But let's look at the offense here for Boise State. Boise State State fans right now, I think, are starting to get excited. Some of the excitement that had worn off coming out of the preseason when Boise State did not perform, especially offensively, the way Boise State fans expected. I think now we are starting to see some of that hype, some of those expectations that we thought we would see week one coming out of the preseason. They're now starting to be fully realized. And this offensive performance for Boise State, while yes, it is against an Air Force team that was missing a lot of players defensively, 6 guys out on defense, while that is true, the Boise State offense that we saw today or Saturday, working together as a complete unit, specifically on the offensive line, should give Boise State fans a lot of excitement moving through the rest of the year. And while I know that Dylan Riley, and we will talk about that, and his performance catches the eyes in this game, the offensive line had a dominant performance. That is the biggest difference in this matchup from even the previous two, even Eastern Washington. This offensive line performance was almost flawless. Was there some holding? Was there some false starts? Certainly there was. But overall, this Boise State offensive line was opening massive holes for the Boise State running game. Dylan Riley had a huge game. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Boise State as a whole averaged over 9 yards a carry. Sire Gaines, who only touched the ball 3 times because he was limited in this game, he had 11.3 yard average. Malik Sherrod touched it 7 times, 11.4 yard average. So 34 yards for Gaines and 80 yards for Sherrod. Dylan Riley, of course, taking the opportunities given him by this offensive line, by the huge holes that would open up on both the left and right side. I know left side was the focal point in the first half, but the right side was also pushed much harder in the second half of the game. So this offensive line as a whole working together. Dylan Riley, of course, took advantage of those opportunities and made them into even bigger plays than they would have otherwise been. If you don't get Dylan Riley or slow him down before he passes the line of scrimmage, good luck stopping him before he's gone for 30, 40, a touchdown. The secondary players, once Dylan Riley gets past that first line, have their work cut out to try and get to him because of how fast he is. And he is not just a speed back, he is clearly quite elusive. We saw him make some great moves on defenders in the open field. And so, yes, the individual performance from the running backs was massive in this game, and especially Dylan Riley. But it all starts with this offensive line that is finally meeting the expectations. We talk about expectations of offense. All of that started with offensive line struggling in the first game, especially through the second game in some aspects as well. That is what held Boise State back. Now that this offensive line seems to have finally gelled together, and it's a point I made, right, that even though you have all this depth back in the offensive line, if one player is not the same from that previous unit, it's going to take a little while to build that cohesion. It doesn't matter if you have a great left tackle and a great left guard. If you don't have great players who all have worked together and have a shared mental model on the entire unit as a whole, it doesn't matter. You can have 4 out of 5 players doing what they're supposed to do. If one player doesn't, and it's a blown assignment, the entire offensive line fails. It's a single organism. And Boise State's offensive line is now finally working as a single organism, and that should give Boise State fans a lot of hope moving forward. So while we still don't really know how good this team is, because defensively it's against an offense that you don't see very often, and offensively it's against a Air Force team that probably is going to struggle to make bowl eligibility this year. So while you still don't necessarily know how good they are, the style of play, the level of complete unit cohesion that we saw in this matchup, I think should give Boise State fans a lot of hope and excitement moving forward. But let's talk about the star of the show in this game, Dylan Riley. What a performance for Dylan Riley. Has worked through so much. Obviously, we all know the story over the offseason, and now coming through where he was not slated to be one of the starting backs on this offense. They bring in a transfer from Fresno State. He gets shifted down the line. He stays in that third string type formation, which is pretty much where he was last year. So even though you lose Ashton Jeanty, he's still there third string. A lot of players could have packed it in. A lot of players could have thrown in the towel, gotten in the transfer portal, but Dylan Riley didn't. He continued to put in the work, and it paid off in a major way in this game. I talked about the offensive line performance. Yes, that was a huge part to the success of the offense overall, but Dylan Riley took advantage of those opportunities in a way that I don't think any other running back on this roster truly can in those moments, because his speed is just completely unmatched. You get him past that first line of the defense, any secondary player is going to have to absolutely nail the pursuit and also the tackle to be able to bring down Dylan Riley because he is just that fast and he's also elusive in the open field as well. We'll talk about here in a moment when we start going through the drives for Boise State, but he made some moves in the open field to juke defenders, to put a stiff arm out, to fight through a tackle and keep on moving forward. It's not just a light feather speed back. He also has the ability to make the plays in the open field as well and power through. His first touchdown of the game, he had the patience and then the burst. It's the ball vision to be able to wait for the hole to open up and then burst through into the end zone. And when he makes that decision, because he is so fast, when he makes that decision to cut, and it's really something I think we've seen him develop into this year, only a second-year player for Boise State, developing his skill sets. I think that is the biggest change in his game this year, is that he now has that ball carrier awareness and vision to see the hole and make the quick move. At one point, he was going to take a negative 4-yard loss, and instead he makes a quick decision to go upfield and he turns that negative 4-yard loss, the kind of plays that we saw Boise State running backs getting tackled behind the line versus USF because they're dancing around and waiting. He says, okay, the play is broken up, I'm going to get what I can, turns a negative 4-yard loss into a 1-yard gain, a 5-yard difference in result, and that is the kind of ability you see out of Dylan Riley. It is going to be very, very challenging as an offensive coordinator when Sire Gaines comes back because he obviously is also elite, and Malik Sherrod is really stepping up as well. How are you going to manage these three running backs? You can't just put one to the bench. All three of them have to have a package in this offense, and it is going to be very, very challenging, I think, to work all that together. But Dylan Riley stepping up when his number was called, taking the 19 carries. Again, I don't think that was something that was expected coming into this game, that he was going to have 19 carries, but every opportunity he got, he showed up and he proved the trust of the coaching staff, and he forced that high carry load. 19 carries for 171 yards, 4 touchdowns, 9-yard average, 2 receptions for 84 yards, and a touchdown. One of only 5 Boise State Broncos to have 5 touchdowns in a game, joining the likes of Ashton Jeanty, Jay Ajayi, Ian Johnson, and John Helmendahler. An incredible performance for Dylan Riley in this matchup. So let's move into talking about some of these drives here for Boise State offensively. The biggest thing we took away, other than the fact that we have an offensive line that is starting to gel, that's a lot of excitement. 2, the fact that we have Dylan Riley starting to explode into his role, and we have a clear playmaker. We've been waiting for a true playmaker to step up in this offense. We've seen the flashes out of Sire Gaines. We've seen some moments out of the likes of Chris Marshall, even Ben Ford. But now Dylan Riley, I think he is stepping himself into a role here as that explosive playmaker that defenses are going to have to find a way to think about. It's going to open up opportunities in the passing game. So the second thing we know is we have a true playmaker, Dylan Riley. The third thing we know is we have a backup quarterback. That was a question mark for Boise State. If you read any of the stuff coming out of spring camp, is that Boise State doesn't have a backup right now. They really don't. It is Maddox Madsen. If he goes down, the season is over. And it looked like our season was over there. The drive number 1, second play, I believe, of the game, Maddox Madsen's leg gets rolled up in a kind of bad-looking way. He goes to injury tent. Max Cutforth comes in. It's a not an effective drive. Boise State ends up having to punt. I thought the game was over. I thought the season was over. I was head in hands that this was the end. And then drive number 2, Max Cutforth comes out. There's 2 plays. Boise State ends up 3rd and 9. Running game's not effective. I think and Air Force has just gone down and scored in a very dramatic fashion the drive before, which we'll talk about here in a moment when we get to the defense. It looks like the game is over. And Boise State rallied. They rallied behind the backup quarterback here in Max Cutforth. He led Boise State down the field. He went 3 out of 4 in the game for 34 yards. Most of that on this drive. Had a great pass to Caples on 3rd and 9. Great completion. I think actually all of his completions were on this drive. Great completion to Caples on 3rd and 9. Then Gaines and Dillon all get into the game and march down the field. Another good pass to Caples again to set them up at the goal line. And then Dylan Riley with his patience and burst being able to get a score. And a great patience on that run again. Dylan Riley, not just speed, he has elusiveness, he has the power, and he has that vision, the ball carrier vision that I think he has developed coming into his second year here for Boise State. That was really, really obvious on that run where he was patient, he waited for the block, he waited for the hole to open, and then he exploded with that speed into the end zone. That was an incredible drive. Now, Max Matson comes back out next drive, and he has a good game overall. Really, another solid performance from Max Matson. 13 for 23, 276 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, which we'll talk about in a moment. Wasn't a flawless performance, but overall a good one. But now we know if Max Matson goes out, we do have a backup quarterback. I still think that it's Max Matson or bust when you're talking about your long-term elite goals of not just making and winning Mountain West Championship game, but of potentially putting yourself back in the playoff conversation. I think Max Matson is the only quarterback on this roster capable of doing that for you. But I think you have an offense with Max Cutforth, at least what we saw in crunch time, when the stakes could not have been higher in that moment. The pressure could not have been higher. He came out and he lived up to those points. My key to the game, my second key of the game for this one, be ready when your number is called, step up when your number is called. He did that, and I think we have at least an offense capable of getting to winning the Mountain West with Max Cutforth. That, again, third thing here for Boise State offensive line, Dylan Riley, and then Max Cutforth as a strong backup, now shows Boise State fans a lot more excitement and hope for the future of this season. It's exciting to start to feel that energy and that hope again moving forward, something that I think Boise State fans we've been missing the last few weeks. Drive number 3, Max Matson comes back in. He has a couple of nice passes, a good one to Chris Marshall. That is a player who he's not yet had his Dylan Riley type moment. He had a big game versus Eastern Washington. A lot of people were excited about that. But when you go back and you watch that tape, I mean, he is a good football player playing an FCS defender. It's not complex routes. A lot of them were the same basic route, and he's just beating the guy in front of him. Not something he's proven he can do consistently versus FBS teams. And he has a lot of yards after contact because, again, he's playing an FCS. And there was a lot I said in that game. Some of this you can pull away and say, this was a team making a big step forward, and we can draw real lessons from. Other elements, and I think Chris Marshall's play in that game was how much of this is he's playing an FCS team versus he's stepping into the moment of finding himself and finding that rhythm between him and Max Matson. Flashes. We see flashes of Chris Marshall. We see that good pass. He has a great route. It's an outside breaking route, and he makes the catch. And he's going upfield, and he has an opportunity. 3 defenders closing in, but he has an opportunity to maybe keep going upfield and beat them. Decides to try and do a cutback kind of spin move situation to get around them. Doesn't realize where he is on the field. Ends up stepping out of bounds, and you can tell he's beating himself up. Also had a drop pass late in the game. Only the one catch there for 13 yards. And that is a player, as Boise State moves throughout the season, that is a player, if he can catch fire and have his Dylan Riley explosive moment and realize his full potential, that I think is going to put Boise State on another level. Just hasn't gotten there yet. But overall, Max Matson much better in this game from what we saw in week 1, continuing the progress we saw versus Eastern Washington. There was a great tight end screen pretty much the next play over. A 15-plus yard pass allowed. The play calling was much better in this game. It wasn't just the execution. It was also the play calling, getting the running back screens, running backs involved in the passing game, something that's not been really used that much so far. The screen games, we thought we'd see a lot of screens coming into the season. We really didn't see very many until this game. We had tight end screens, we had running back screens. Boise State using their players effectively, and the play calling much, much better in this matchup. And then great blocking downfield for Riley. On the left side, offensive line just opens up an entire Red Sea for Dylan Riley to come pouring through. And then Ben Ford has a key block against 2 defenders, really. It's 2 defenders flowing left. He clips the inside defender, and it also basically pushes the second defender out of the way. Dylan Riley hits that point with the speed that he has, bursts right through. Ben Ford only had 1 catch for 22 yards in this game, but he had some really, really strong blocks. I'm so impressed by what I've seen out of Ben Ford coming into this season in his senior year, getting involved in the passing game, but also in a game like this where you need the running game to be effective, to be able to try and negate some of the just ground and pound of the Air Force offense that you're seeing on the other side. You put him down and you say, we need you to block, and he did exactly that. That was one that he broke for a touchdown, and he had another drive later on where he broke a great block, key block to break Dylan Riley for a 30-plus yard run. Huge performance by Ben Ford, and that was one of them. Touchdown for Dylan Riley. We'd seen his patience and his burst on his first touchdown. The second one, it was just speed. He has the vision to find the openings, to take that opportunity from that block, to cut through at just the right moment. All of that was perfect, but in the end, It's just pure speed from Dylan Riley. He scores his second touchdown of the night. And then drive number 4, Boise State comes out and scores another touchdown. This time it's more of a little bit of a traditional drive down the field. Sherrod has a really nice run. Again, like I said, he had a huge game. 7 carries for 80 yards and 11.4 yard average and a touchdown. He gets Boise State down the field, and then Boise State on third, and this was a really long one. 3rd and 21, Boise State, Maddox Madsen finds Wagner for a first down. Maddox Madsen wasn't asked to do too much in this game. This really was Dylan Riley in the running back room stepping up and carrying the load. But when he was needed on third downs, Boise State went 7 of 10 on third downs. 70% completion or conversion rate on third downs. When Max Madsen was asked to complete a pass on third down or make a big play, he and these wide receivers and tight ends, which have not been consistent being able to get open versus defenders, they consistently, almost every time, were able to do just that. And here's a situation where 3rd and 21, you expect this is going to be one of those disappointing drives where so much potential and it doesn't end up. 3rd and 21, Wagner should have been a touchdown. The turf monster got him. Matt Lauder finishing with a touchdown a few plays later. And then drive number 5, drive number 6, Boise State, unfortunately, not able to put the ball in the end zone in both of those. I'm more worried about drive number 6 for Boise State because I think it shows continuing issues with special teams. Might be an interesting thing to say considering that drive ended in an interception and not a field goal. But I think the reason that did, a drive that had a lot of potential, a lot of excitement. Boise State gets down the field, a 24-yard catch and run by Caples, who had a big game. We've been waiting for Caples to step up and be that leader offensively for Boise State. He led in catches as far as reception goes, 5 catches for 87 yards. He's also the leader in receiving yards overall. He had some real key moments, some third down receptions, some big keep the drive going when Max was in instead of Maddox Madsen. And then this is another moment where he gets Boise State into field goal range. Then they do another great run to Malik Sherrod. He catches the ball in open space. Great vision again, gets to the sideline, gets all the way down inside the 10-yard line. And throughout this entire time, it seems like Boise State is acting like they have to find the end zone. The plays that Maddox Madsen is making, the decisions, very desperation type. He is throwing the ball into very tight coverage, trying to force the ball in. There was a bunch of fouls on both sides, defensively and offensively, that reset the field a couple of times, gave Boise State some more opportunities. So they had several shots on goal, and every one of them, it really didn't look like the receiver was truly open. Maddox Madsen forcing the ball several times, and the last one ended in interception. I think all of that points to the fact that Boise State doesn't have a kicking game right now. That was not characteristic of the rest of the matchup. Maddox Madsen, outside of those moments when he had time on the clock, when he had field to work with, and even when he didn't, when he was in the end zone, but he had time on the clock and it wasn't a 30-second type drive where you have to score or that it doesn't matter, he played great. In that moment, I think he and the rest of the offense felt we have got to score a touchdown here because if we give it to the foot of our kicker, it is not going in. I feel like in that case, and I'm not trying to say that Max Madsen doesn't bear responsibility for an interception. That was a 3 defenders he threw the ball into. It had been a perfect throw, and even then it probably would have been knocked out by the 3 defenders surrounding the receiver. He slightly floats that, or not slightly, it was quite a bit of an overthrow. Overthrows, floats the ball, and it gets picked off. Bad decision by Max Madsen. But that whole offensive drive, that last drive of the game, it didn't feel like they were trying to get into field goal range. That didn't seem like it was an option. It felt like they had to score and were willing to risk the pass to put it into a bad situation because, okay, at the end of the day, it's the same result. You throw a pick. If I don't throw a pick, it's incompletion. We miss the field goal and it's a no score anyway. So I might as well try and get a touchdown. That is what that felt like to me. And that, while there are some real positives to pull out of this, offensive line, Dylan Riley, like I've talked about as well, a backup quarterback stepping up, Latrell Caples, there are some strong positives, obviously, in a performance this good offensively to pull from. That is a continuing carryover of that little bit of concern, not just a little bit, major concern for Boise State fans, the fact that we just don't seem to have an entire third of what should be part of our strategy when we're looking at how we're going to beat these teams. I just don't think the kicking game is an option, and I think that was symbolic of that. But the second half for Boise State, they came out, made up for how the first half ended, and scored 4 straight touchdowns. I'm not going to go through every single drive here, but there was a great run by Malik Sherrod. Dylan Riley had an 80-yard reception where there was another great block by Casey down the field. Just a pancake, laid the way. Dylan Riley, though, it was able to escape and make that run into where the block was because of his speed. There was a nice little bump block by Chris Marshall, but it's the kind of situation where it's another running back the defender might have had time to get over, but Dylan Riley's speed is all the difference. Again, I'm saying he is going to have to continue to be a major part of this offense moving forward. You cannot deny his playmaking capability. He has proved that is not simply the opponent he's matched up against. He is a true running back in this system, and he needs to be getting those opportunities. And then lastly, of course, the last two drives, both of those touchdowns by Dylan Riley, the juke in the open field that I'd mentioned earlier, where the offensive line gives a nice opportunity, one-on-one versus, I believe it was a corner, and he is flowing right, and he just does a quick left step in and goes up this road for a touchdown. Incredible run. And then, obviously, to ice it, untouched 43-yard run on third down, straight up the middle into the teeth of defense. Offensive line, again, parts the Red Seas. Looked like the Jay Ajayi run in 2014, the Fiesta Bowl. Nobody around him, and he goes all the way in to ice the game for a touchdown. So offensively for Boise State, a incredible performance, an A-plus performance for Boise State. The type of offensive performance we've been waiting to see. Boise State has now scored close to 50 points in both their games, obviously getting 50 versus Eastern Washington and getting 49 versus Air Force. We will have to see where this trend continues, but there are a lot of strong signs of excitement for this Boise State offense moving forward. All right, now we've talked about all the good things. And I don't mean that literally. There are still some good things to be pulled out, but the main good piece, the excitement piece for Boise State. The second thing we need to address is 515 Air Force yards and 37 points. Boise State's offense won this game. The fact that Boise State was able to outscore Air Force, even matching drive after drive, 4 straight touchdowns. They didn't have a drive other than the interception drive at the end where they kneeled down. They did not have a drive in the second half where they did not end with a touchdown. That's incredible, especially versus Air Force on the road. The level of stress and excitement about this game, the fact that Boise State finished this game that strong, absolutely amazing. Absolutely incredible. It shows, I think, the benefit of that bye week. Spencer Danielson, Chris Potter. I was thinking about Matt Miller. Chris Potter getting this offense fully focused on this game and having the result, the performance that we saw. But when your defense gives up 37 points, you have to have an offensive performance. You have to have an A-plus performance to win the game. Boise State did that. If that had not been the case, if they'd had an A or an A- type performance in this matchup, this might have ended up in a loss or much closer game than it ended up being. For Boise State, I was prepared coming into this preview before I just rewatched the game. Again, I was camping, but I was able to watch it live. I was prepared to give this a very bad grade. I do think that some of the reaction to the defensive performance in this game is a little bit overblown. Having rewatched the game, I just sat down and rewatched the whole thing, took my notes, and now I'm doing the game review. There were certainly some massive blown coverage type moments. Air Force passed for 246 yards. Air Force, an option team. Previous high, and they've only 2 games in the season, but previous high versus Utah State, which is the highest scoring affair, 179 yards. Almost 100 yards more in this game. And from their quarterback, who is not known as the passing quarterback. Major concerns there. But there's a couple things to think about. And the first one being that it is an option offense. It is a Boise State team that has very little experience at all with the option offense. They didn't have to face it last year. The last time that Boise State faced this was in a very tumultuous point in the Boise State program when Andy Avalos had just been fired and Spencer Danielson steps in and they faced Air Force. That was the last time that they'd faced this Air Force program. So I think that you can somewhat excuse some of the blown type pass coverage opportunities. If it wasn't a trend throughout the season so far, and even going into elements of last season, the year before, I think you would say, okay, they were facing the option. Now, I think that when you put what happened tonight based on everything else, the precedent, that's where the concern is. This just seems to be justification for fears that already exist within the fan base over the capabilities of the secondary. A secondary that I think has validated those fears so far this season. But Boise State's defense, what I wanted to see out of them, number one, overall, was stop the option in this game. Air Force is going to have the blown type coverage opportunities. They do that versus everybody. Now, I didn't expect it to be 246 yards worth of opportunities, but I expected them to give up some big plays in the passing game. What I did not expect was Boise State to come out and play as well as they did against the option overall. Listen, I know that they passed all over Boise State, 246 yards passing. I understand that. But Boise State overall, besides a few drives of kind of blown type coverage moments or single missed tackle moments, overall, Boise State actually played really, really well versus the option. If you go back and watch that game, yeah, drive number one, they basically let the fullback score a touchdown. He runs 60 plus yards down the field. Few plays later, 3 plays later, he runs it into the end zone. Massive blown opportunity. The linebacker is out of position. He makes a blown cover. He breaks a tackle down the field. Bone Phelps, the linebacker, has to come all the way back downfield to make the tackle. That was a blown opportunity, blown moment. After that, though, Boise State buckled down. Second drive. Really, really good really good eye discipline for Boise State's defense. They stop the option. They stop a screen pass, force a punt. Drive number 3, again, really, really good eye discipline. They stop the pitch. They stop the quarterback. They stop the fullback. There's a pass interference on Air Force that pushes them back, and they leads to a 4th down stop. Really, really good play. Really, really good play for Boise State. Drive number 3. Okay, drive number 4, they switch up quarterbacks. That, for some reason, messes Boise State up a little bit. They have the biggest difference for Air Force in this game was Cesarca. He had 13 out of 18 for 246 yards, 2 touchdowns, interception, also 110 yards on the ground. He was a difference maker. As soon as he entered the field, he brought a different level. But even so, most of what Air Force ended up doing in this game offensively was advantageous opportunities, moments that were not necessarily representative of the whole from this entire defensive effort. So Cesarca, first play in, has a 38-yard run. The option breaks down. I think the defense was kind of smacked in the mouth by that, similar to the first drive, and they end up focusing too much on the quarterback. The running back gets open. There's a pass opportunity. Then there's a roughing the passer. So the defense is starting to lose its control a little bit. Wildcat touchdown, drive number 4. But drive number 5, just like in reaction to drive number 1, Boise State buckles down again and stops the option. They stopped the option, specifically the fullback drive, which was the biggest factor there on drive number 5. Stops the fullback drive and then runs up the middle and forces a punt. Second half for Boise State, their offense is clicking, and they are scoring quickly. That is not actually good for the defense. When you have an offense that scores quickly and you've just had to stay on the field for a 6 minute drive, and now you have to go back out there again after your offense scored within 2 minutes, you could have really seen the Boise State defense break down against the option in the second half. They really didn't. The yardage that Air Force got overall in this game was in the passing game. It wasn't versus what I thought was going to be the biggest concern for them, which was the long runs off the pitch play. Did they have a couple like that? Sure. But they also had a lot of moments where the pitchman got absolutely demolished. The secondary was headhunting out there. Benefield in the second half, drive number 3, had a massive hit right after the pitch. It was probably, and you talk about players coming to see that you can go see and get some autographs from. One of the biggest hits I've seen since Tyreek Jones and JL Skinner were out there for Boise State. A demolishing hit by Benefield. And again, later on, great coverage. McCoy makes a good tackle on the quarterback. It was not on the ground that Air Force was hurting Boise State the most in this game. Yes, did they get a lot of yards on the ground? Yeah, they did. They had 269 yards rushing. But 60 plus of that came on the first drive from the fullback, and Cesarca had a couple of nice runs that were not necessarily representative of what we saw throughout the rest of the matchup. Overall, if you take out that 60-yard rush, now Boise State's down to about 200 yards allowed on the ground. Cesarca, a couple of long 30-yard plus type quarterback runs. You're down to holding Air Force to about 170-ish yards rushing, which for an Air Force team is really low. Boise State's defense overall played really, really well against the option. What they did not play very well against was those blown coverage type opportunities on the back end. And I'm going to say it's hard to evaluate that. How much of that is just players being completely out of position? How much of it is mistakes? How much of it is uncontrollable errors? There was a couple of times there where Air Force had a long pass. that was not on the player that gave up the play. I'm specifically thinking about drive number 1. Obviously, Air Force comes out and they throw a touchdown in the very first drive. It's a 75 or whatever it is yard touchdown pass. And everybody is going after Irby because he is a focal point for the fans' criticism, deservedly so in some cases. He has not played up to expectations. And I think that he, like Banks, gets a lot of that focus from the negativity. But in that drive, that wasn't his fault. I watched that play 5 times. I rewound it 5 times and watched that play. Irby makes the right call. They're in a zone coverage where if anybody goes deep over the center, Irby is dropping back. Zion Washington has the sideline. Okay, so the wide receiver on the right side runs a go. Zion Washington rotates from the center safety position over, and Irby makes the right call to turn and run with the receiver who's coming streaking up the middle, and he is in position, and Zion Washington runs into him. Irby is turning and running. Zion Washington is coming across the field, and he bumps Irby just enough. He doesn't lay him out, but it's just enough that springs the wide receiver. He's now open. He goes all the way down for a touchdown. Everyone's blaming Irby, but that wasn't his fault in that moment. Drive number 3, we talked about Benefield having that huge hit on that drive. He ends up allowing a touchdown pass that he tripped. He is in good position, and he falls down, and now the pass is open. McCoy tries to get back, but it's not his guy. He tries to get back. He's not able to, and it's a touchdown pass on a great play, by the quarterback. He's on the run. He finds an open receiver, and he's able to throw that corner of the end zone touchdown. Not on McCoy, on Benefield, but that's one of those situations where your feet get tangled up and you trip. A kind of a fluke play. So I think that in this game, where there's some clearly out of position, poor plays, like we've seen somewhat consistently this year, and at times last year and the year before as well, from this Boise State secondary, certainly. But were there also a lot of other factors of having to focus on and stop an offense that if you allow them to drive down the field on you in the triple option, eating up all of your clock, destroying your offense's momentum, forcing you to pull into your death because you're getting absolutely beat up back there, Boise State would have lost this game if they couldn't stop the option. They were unable to stop the passing game for a large part of it, but that's not Air Force. That's not what Air Force wins games on. They're not set up to do that. They can have some flash, they have some good moments, but they're not set up to win games in that system. Boise State, yes, Air Force had time of possession in this game. Boise State was 23 minutes time of possession. Air Force had close to about 40, so they still had the time of possession battle won. But overall, in this game, it was not through the typical Air Force option offense that they beat Boise State. It was moments given up the passing game where Boise State is really focused, in position to stop the option, safeties on or corners on islands, get caught looking in the backfield for that option, and throw over the top, and they miss it. A couple of mistakes as well. I do not think that this performance defensively, while it was a bad one, yes, I do not think that it is something that should be setting off warning bells. The thing that sets off warning bells is the game versus USF and to a certain extent Eastern Washington. This seems to validate those warning bells. I don't think this game, viewed purely on its own, is enough to justify some of the negativity the fan base has. Fire Warren, those kind of comments. Should he be on the hot seat? He and Stacey Collins should absolutely be on the hot seat right now with what we've seen out of both of their units coming into this season so far. Absolutely. But this performance alone, there's just not enough to know going off of this one game how much of it translates into future matchups versus traditional offenses when you're not having to focus on stopping an option type playbook. There are moments of concern, certainly, but there's the negativity overall for this Boise State defense. I thought they played better than a lot of people are giving them credit for. And I think a lot of the downsides will no longer be relevant when you get to other teams that don't have this same system for that you saw versus Air Force. So overall, I'm going to give them a C grade. I'm going to give them a C grade in this matchup. But I'm going to give them a C plus because they stopped the option. They really did overall stop this option. They struggled to stop the quarterback run, which I know is an element of the option, but they've struggled to stop every quarterback run. They were consistently able to stop the pitch. They were consistently, after the first drive, able to stop the fullback run. And overall, even the quarterback run was not a consistent weapon throughout the entire matchup. There was a couple of drives where it was a major factor, but not consistently throughout the entire game. That might be an unpopular opinion because I know the fan base as a whole has their pitchforks out for the secondary right now and the defense as a whole. But I think, again, in this game, it was the style of the opponent. You are going to expect to give up that type of yardage overall, I think, versus an Air Force team. The fact that most of it came through the air and not on the ground versus Boise State, I think that is a huge positive for this team and that they were able to have such a strong performance overall. And that I didn't know if a bye week alone was enough time to be able to install the discipline factor that Boise State has lacked so far coming into the season. Boise State had the discipline. They had the eye discipline, they had the awareness, but they also had the tackling discipline. Boise State had some really good open field tackles. There were a couple times, we talked about that first drive, the fullback bounces off, I believe it was Irby, and keeps on going up the field. But overall, Boise State's tackling, their form much better in this game, and overall their eye discipline much better too. So I think that there's a lot of excitement to pull from this offensive performance. I think the negatives, we need to see another week. I think time will tell. It's time to maybe step back from the cliff side a bit when we're talking about the defense. Be concerned about the first 2 weeks and look forward to what the fourth game of the season has for Boise State. And hold back your major criticism until we see more out of this unit, because I don't think what we saw defensively for Boise State in this one is representative of what we'll see the rest of the season. All right, Boise State special teams, and I'm almost done here. Special teams, we've already talked about the fact that they can't kick is something that contributed to some offensive failures in this game. And I think that impacts the grade for the special teams, because even though they didn't kick, they made all their PATs. Punting was really, really good. Strong positive, continuing positive. Oscar Doyle is not getting the hype that he deserves. He deserves to be getting that JFR level hype right now from the fan base. He has been absolutely pretty much perfect coming into this season for Boise State. He has stepped up into a role exactly as you wanted to see him and been a major contributor, one of the shining lights on the special teams consistently. He has not had a bad game so far through his first 3 performances. He has performed exemplary, and again, 2 punts for 50-yard average and 1 inside the 20. Great performance again from Oscar. Return game, Boise State, Sherrod, he's starting to show that explosiveness. He had a 7-yard return, which doesn't sound very much, but it's a lot when you consider that he caught that ball as the defender was about to hit him, sidestepped that defender, broke 2 or 3 other tackles to get 7 yards down the field. He is starting to show glimpses of what we saw when he was at Fresno State. He is starting to develop that confidence. We saw it on offense. I think he's feeling that pressure down his neck from the likes, obviously, of Sire Gaines, but also now Dylan Riley, and it is making him better. And he's also using every opportunity to prove his worth in special teams. He is really pouring that energy in, and I thought we saw some really nice opportunities from him. Some nice burst in the kick return. Taking, and at one point it looks like on the second kick return, he only had 2, but the second kick return that he brings back, it looks like he is going to get tackled well short of the 20. He's made a bad decision to cut to the left side, but he shows that speed and elusiveness to get upfield and make it just again, net neutral type, close to the 25 yards that you would have gotten anyway from your kick return. He's able to do that, and if he can start to get some of that blocking and the teams give him an opportunity, all he needs is one chance, and he is going to break one. Mark my words, Malik Sherrod will have a kick return or punt return, and I'm betting it's going to be a punt return for a touchdown this season, and we are starting to see the glimmers of that. So overall, Boise State special teams did fine. It was what they were unable to do because they've shown that they can't do it that hurt Boise State, and that's kick field goals. Though you didn't see them kick field goals, but they also weren't asked to because Boise State knows that they can't, and that impacts Boise State. So overall, I'm going to give them a C because they didn't hurt the game necessarily. They didn't make it better necessarily, but by the lack of their presence, that is something that Boise State, when you talk about continuing concerns for this Boise State team, talking about the secondary, special teams, a continuing concern. Nothing in this matchup, you have all these positives to bolster the fan spirit offensively. Nothing in this matchup that you saw defensively or special teams makes you feel better about either of those units. So a C overall for this Boise State special teams. All right, last bit here, looking at how Boise State performed against my keys to the game, and then we'll be done. So my key number 1 was 2020 eye discipline. I included in eye discipline is ability to stop the pass. So It's not going to be an A grade, but it's a C plus. It's the grade you got overall on defense, because in 3 out of the 4 elements of what Air Force can do, fullback dive, pitch game, and also obviously the quarterback run as well, 3 out of those 4 elements, Boise State did a really solid job in the B plus type range overall throughout the game of stopping. It was the 4th element of being able to pass the game that they were pass the ball, which they were really pretty much unable to stop at any point throughout the matchup. So overall, I disciplined C plus, but much improved, and being able to rally discipline-wise, that should give Boise State fans some hope that this coaching staff is starting to figure things out as far as putting on the field the level of effort and production that we thought we would see coming in from the preseason. The potential of these players, I don't think is yet fully realized, but the areas that we had the most concerns about, that caused me to have the most concerns for this Boise State team, was the fact that they looked undisciplined overall and unmotivated. Those have gone away. The discipline is much better, and their motivation is very high. Again, they could have allowed the quick scores on offense to really allow them to fall apart defensively, and they didn't. I am excited by what I see out of the progression of this Boise State defense, even if we are still continuing to see failures in key points that have not yet shown anything that gives us hope for the future that those have been fixed. But the cultural issues, which was my biggest fears, those have started to be fixed, and I thought we saw a good performance out of them in those areas versus Air Force. Key number 2 for Boise State: step up when your name is called. That happened 100%. Malik Sherrod, starting to see his star fading a little bit. He had a great game. The focus on Dylan Riley, but Malik Sherrod, when he was given the ball an opportunity, he gashed on almost every single run he got. He was playing his heart out in special teams. He stepped up. Dylan Riley, this was your opportunity. You fulfilled it. This was an incredible game out of Dylan Riley. Boise State across the board here, talking about Max Cutforth stepping up. When the opportunity was presented, the players stepped up, and that was exactly what I wanted to see, and it's an A-plus performance in key number 2. And then key number 3, run, and run a little bit more. Boise State took that one to heart. This was a clear run focus, pulling into your deepest unit, which is your running game, allowing the offensive line cohesion to really show in this matchup. This, I think, established something that Boise State is going to be able to build off of, and the fact that they have proven themselves this dangerous will open up opportunities in the passing game, as opponents are now really having to prepare in a similar way they did with Ashton Jeanty, having to prepare for this 3-headed running back attack for Boise State. So overall in this game, a really good, strong performance from Boise State overall. Most of that carried by the offense, but I think we're starting to see the culture that we were so concerned about in that week 1 game getting back into what we recognize as a blue-collar Boise State type mentality. The culture is fixing itself. The offense is showing exactly what we thought we would see, and that is exciting. Still a lot of questions for defense and special teams. I will absolutely give you that, but I think we need more time, especially on defense, to really find out how bad they are, or potentially what has been fixed over a bye week, where Air Force is not a fair test. It just really isn't a fair test of where your team is at. Your offense is going to be weird because it's going to have sat so long on the sideline, and the momentum is going to be weird. So the fact that they perform so well really shows you a lot. If they perform poorly, it would have been hard to judge. But the defense performing poorly, you expect that versus Air Force. So who knows how good this Boise State team is. But what we do know is that this is the last time that we have had to face the Air Force Academy. And I know I talked about last time in my preview video, about what this game means for me and my family heritage with this matchup. Again, I've had four members of my family that have served in the Air Force, and my dad, my grandfather, and my uncle all went through the Air Force Academy, were involved with the football program at some element during their time there. And so I've loved these matchups as a family member with that. I think Boise State fans have loved the opportunity to interact with the Air Force Academy cadets and all of the Air Force military members, so many of which are in Boise. Obviously, Mountain Home, a huge part of the Boise community. So much respect for Air Force. In that element, it is sad to see this game go away. But for everything that we talked about in this video, massive sigh of relief. Boise State, I said they needed to finish their time in the Mountain West the way that they started it, by beating Air Force just like they did in 2011. Well, they did just that. A great performance overall in this matchup. Certainly a great way to end this series. A true classic in that sense, ending it with a historic moment from Dylan Riley. This is how you wanted to see the Air Force series end, at least as a Boise State fan. And so last time I'm ever going to have to say this on this channel talking about Boise State and Air Force, but tons of respect to the Air Force Academy cadets, and also obviously thank you for the military service of all of my listeners, watchers who have any kind of connection to the Air Force or the Army or the Navy or any form of military, but especially the Air Force because of how important that is to my family heritage. So that's it for the video. This was a very, very fun game to watch live. It was a very fun game to rewatch. I'm going to rewatch it again because I'm going to make highlights here in a moment for the Boise State versus Air Force game. So keep an eye out for that on the channel. Please make sure you let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm sure I'm going to disagree with the fan base here on the defense because I've already seen the reactions on Twitter right now and the pitchforks out for Warren, and I know what the feelings are in the fan base. So I want to have that conversation with you. I'm sure you think I'm wrong there, and I want you to give me that pushback, and let's have that conversation and let me see your perspective and your side. And I'm sure there's some things I'm not looking at exactly the way that you would, and I want to have that conversation. And let me know your excitement for the offense and your continuing concerns for the special teams, which I'm sure we share. And let's look forward to Boise State versus App State, and let's look forward to the grand opening of Expedia Cruises of Boise. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe. I'll see you guys here in a few days when I do the preview for App State. And as always, go Big Blue!